the 20 March Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Holt, would you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Present.
Mr. Rogers represents the Berkeley District. Ms. Knoll.
Present.
Ms. Knoll represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rose.
Here.
Mr. Rose represents the Roberts District. Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Mr. Kropp.
Here.
Mr. Kropp represents the Powhatan District. Mr. O'Connor, who's an at-large member and is chaired this year, could not be with us this evening. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District and is vice chair to the commission. I'm Paul Holt, Director of Community Development and Planning for the county. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Holt.
Thank you.
The first item on our agenda is the annual organizational meeting, and the first item that we have is the election of officers. Do I have a motion for the chair of the Planning Commission? Mr. Kraft.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Frank Polster for the new chair of the Planning Commission.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I will close it. And it's a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Congratulations.
Second item, thank you. Second item is for the vice chair, and I'd like to nominate Mr. Rob Rose. Are there any other motions for the vice chair position? Hearing none, I'd like to hear a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Motion carries. So we have a new vice chair. Congratulations, Mr. Rose. The second item that we have, and I think we've talked about this already, is the proposed calendar for 2023-24. Unless there's any items of discussion on that, I'd like to call for a voice vote for the approval of it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 So we are on now to our first public comment. Mr. Holt, do we have any cards?
I have no cards.
Okay, moving right along, I believe the first item is our fiscal year 2024-28 capital improvement program. Ms. Costello, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. After a series of meetings to discuss and evaluate this year's capital improvements program requests, the Policy Committee is forwarding its recommendation for the FY 2024 through FY 2028 CIP for your consideration. This year, a total of 32 projects were submitted, 24 from county departments, 4 from the Williamsburg Regional Library, and 4 from the Williamsburg-James City County Schools. Of the 32 projects submitted, 17 county projects, 3 library, and 3 school projects were included in the previous 5-year CIP budget. Committee members used a standardized set of ranking criteria to prioritize each application. This is provided in your packets for reference. The scores generated by individual committee members were then averaged and standardized through a Z-score process to produce a prioritized list. On the screen is the Policy Committee's final project rankings in order of priority. At its February 23rd meeting, the committee voted unanimously to forward these priorities to serve as a recommendation to the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of these priorities to the Board of Supervisors for consideration during the budget process. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for staff? Hearing none, I will open the public hearing for the CIP. Do we have any cards? I will close the open hearing and open it up to board members' discussion or comments. Well, I have one that I wanted to make, and that was that you may have seen the note that we had when we looked at this, is that the absence of Firehouse 6, which was previously on the CIP list for the last previous 2 years, ranked number 3 and number 6 for it. I'm not sure why it's not on here, but I think it's important enough that we consider at least recommending to the board that it be instated onto the CIP list for this year. You may recall about 7 years ago, the board sat down with the police chief and the fire chief to go over future plans for firehouses. And if you take a look at our comp plan, the level of service for a new firehouse is 365 calls a year. When we talked with the fire chief, two of the things that he said that struck me is that the Firehouse 6 would not go forward until the equipment and the staffing were brought on board. And in fact, the board approved the salaries for that, and they have been on, and thank God they were there during the COVID period. The second thing that caught my attention is that he said that if it would open today, and I'm talking about in the upper county, it would be 1,000 calls at least. That's 3 times what our level of service indicates. The other thing that caught me about this, which I didn't recall from any of the discussions, is that if you're a resident up in Stonehouse, your insurance for fire insurance is higher because there isn't a firehouse close to that area for it. So, based on those discussions, and thank Mr. Haldeman for bringing it up, asked the question, what happened about Firehouse 6? I thought it was important for us to at least think about this and recommend it to the board as an inclusion in the CIP.
Thank you, Mr. Polster. There were 2 recommendations actually from the policy committee, that one. And the second one was to consolidate projects where feasible and where marshaling costs or scale efficiencies yield savings. Possibilities are paving projects at the Chickahominy River Park and at the James River Marina, and also the Pocahontas Trail Project and the Blow Flats Road improvements. Were just 2 suggestions, that's all, but part of the recommendation is to consolidate where it makes sense.
And I think the Parks and Recs were more than willing to take a look at it for it. Are there any other discussions on the CIP? If not, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Holt, would you call the roll? And the motion is with conditions.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Krupp?
Aye.
And Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
The second to the last item on our agenda is Planning Commission discussions and requests. Any discussions or questions for staff? The board coverage for the next month is I'll have to make out that schedule, and I'll be asking you if you have any preferences for months that you would like to take, and I'll take the first month so we can get that moving, okay? All right, let me then close that out, and if there's nothing else, can I have a motion for adjournment to our...
Mr. Chairman, just before you do, I'd just like to take a second and thank Mr. O'Connor for a year of great service as chairman. I don't know how he does that with a full-time job, but and I'm glad he's not here, so I can't be accused of sucking up. But he did a great job. Again, I don't know how many times he's served as chair, but I just wanted to thank him.
You're here. Any other items? If not, can I get a motion for adjournment for our 5 April 2023 meeting?
So
To
moved.
adjourn. So
All in
moved.
favor?
Aye.
Rich?
Thank you.
Good charge.